Ren's heart pounded as he pulled the woman, Eri, along with him through the narrow corridors of the market. His instincts were sharp, but even with all his training, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every shadow seemed to hide danger, every sound a possible threat. The Silver enforcers were closing in fast. They'd seen Ren break into the cages and knew someone had escaped, but they didn't expect the woman to be standing at his side, looking as calm as if she were just taking a walk. Ren glanced over at her, trying to make sense of it all. She moved with a grace that was almost otherworldly, her silver skin glowing faintly under the dim lights. The collar, the one he had ripped off her neck just minutes ago, lay forgotten on the ground, but the effect of its removal was far from over. "Stay close," Ren whispered, tightening his grip on his weapon. He led the way, moving swiftly but carefully, keeping his eyes on the crowd ahead. He needed to find an escape route. Eri didn't speak, but her presence beside him was undeniable. She felt different, somehow. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he could sense a connection. It was like something invisible was pulling them together. The feeling unsettled him. He was used to being alone. He didn't need distractions. As they neared a corner, Ren spotted a small doorway leading to an alley. It was cramped, a dead end to most, but it could give them the moment they needed to regroup. "Through here," he urged, pointing toward the door. Eri nodded and followed. Just as they reached the entrance, the first of the Silver enforcers rounded the corner. Ren didn't hesitate. He fired a quick shot, disabling the enforcer's weapon, and ducked into the alley. Eri was right behind him. The moment they were out of sight, Ren pushed his back against the wall, trying to catch his breath. He didn't know how much longer they could keep running. The Silvers had more resources than anyone he'd ever dealt with, and they wouldn't stop until they found them. Eri stood beside him, her head slightly tilted as if listening for something Ren couldn't hear. "We need to go faster," she said, her voice soft but urgent. He raised an eyebrow. "How do you know that?" Eri's gaze met his. "I can feel them," she said quietly. "The Silvers, their thoughts. They are already searching for us, but they do not understand what we have done." Ren frowned. "What do you mean?" Eri hesitated, then placed a hand over her chest. "When you removed the collar, you connected with me. We are now bound by the old laws of my people." Ren's heart skipped a beat. "Bound?" She nodded, her blue eyes steady. "I cannot leave you. I must stay by your side. If you reject me, the bond will end, but it will be painful for me. But if you choose to keep me, we will be connected for as long as we both live." Ren shook his head. "I didn't choose this. I just wanted to get you out of there." Eri's expression softened. "I know, but the bond is not just about choice. It is about our destinies being tied together. When you freed me, you became my protector. And I, in turn, am bound to you." Ren rubbed his forehead, trying to make sense of the situation. He had been trained for combat, not for this strange, ancient law of another species. He had never wanted to be anyone's master. But as he stood there, looking into Eri's unwavering eyes, he couldn't deny the strange feeling that had settled in his chest. She had a presence that was impossible to ignore. She was not just a prisoner, not just a woman he had freed. She was something more. Before he could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the alley. Ren quickly pulled Eri to the side, pressing himself against the wall. They both stayed silent, listening. The Silvers were getting. He nodded and moved forward, pulling her with him. As they sprinted down the narrow path, Ren couldn't shake the feeling that they were running from something much bigger than just the Silvers. There was something about this bond, something about Eri's calm determination, that felt far more important than any of them realized. But what was it? As they reached another turn, Eri suddenly stopped. "I can hear them," she said, her voice tense. Ren stopped too, looking at her. "What do you mean?" Eri's blue eyes seemed to glow even brighter now. "They are closing in on us, but I also hear Something else. A way out. This way. Without waiting for a response, she took off down the alley, moving faster than Ren had ever seen anyone run. For a moment, Ren stood frozen, unsure of what to do. But then he realized that in this moment, he had no choice but to trust her. He didn't know what kind of bond had tied them together, but if they were going to survive, they would need to work as one. And for the first time, he wasn't sure if they were simply running from the Selvers, or if they were running towards something that would change everything. Ren stepped lightly onto the dusty ground of the Outer Rim's black market, his eyes scanning the scene with practiced calm. This place was a maze of crooked alleys and hidden stalls, filled with illegal trade goods, shady characters, and more than a few broken dreams. But Ren wasn't here for just any job. This was a rescue mission. The mission had come through a whisper in the dark. Word was that Selver Cartel, notorious for trafficking sentient species, had a shipment arriving tonight. There were humans, yes, but there were also others. Rare, dangerous, and valuable. The Selvers didn't care who they enslaved, as long as they could turn a profit. Ren, mercenary and former soldier, had been hired to break into this auction and free anyone who hadn't already been sold. His heart burned at the thought of people being sold like cattle. He wasn't some hero, but he wasn't the type to let a fellow being suffer when he had the chance to stop it. He crouched behind a pile of crates, watching the auction unfold in the heart of the market. Alien voices echoed as bidders from across the galaxy shouted over each other. Ren's target was an area in the far back, a group of captives locked in cages, waiting to be sold off. He knew his time was short. The Selvers ran their auctions quickly, always on the lookout for interference. Ren tapped his wrist calm, signaling the team he had to meet up with. He was going in. The doors to the main building opened, revealing the shady auctioneer, a large reptilian figure with glowing yellow eyes. The crowd went silent as the first item, a human male, was brought forward. He stood there, a man stripped of hope, staring blankly as a buyer examined him. His price was set, and just like that, he was sold. Ren's eyes narrowed. He had no time to waste. His comm buzzed with a confirmation from his contact. The buyer's ship had landed, and the countdown had begun. He moved. Sliding through the shadows, Ren reached the farthest cage, where the last of the captives stood. Among them, a woman stood out. She had silver skin that shimmered under the dim lights, her eyes a bright, piercing blue that seemed almost unnatural. Her features were sharp and delicate, yet she had a strength in her presence that caught Ren off guard. The woman, whoever she was, stood perfectly still, her face calm but filled with something else, something that Ren couldn't quite place. The auctioneer noticed the mercenaries' movement, but Ren had already acted. A flash of light, and a simple laser shot disabled the lock on the cage. "Go," Ren ordered, stepping inside the small, now open space. The woman's eyes flicked to him, but she made no move to escape. Ren extended his hand toward her. "I'm getting you out of here," he said, his voice low but urgent. She hesitated, her eyes flashing with confusion and uncertainty. The woman glanced down at the collar around her neck, an odd metallic band with strange markings etched into it. She didn't make a sound, but Ren could see her muscles tense. He had no time to explain. He had to move quickly. With a swift motion, Ren grabbed the collar and ripped it off. The instant the collar fell to the ground, the woman's whole body stiffened. Her head snapped up, her blue eyes locking onto his. The intensity in her gaze felt like an electric shock. Ren took a step back, suddenly feeling like he had done something wrong. He wasn't sure what he expected to happen after he freed her, but this wasn't it. Before he could speak, the woman fell to one knee in front of him, her head bowing. "Master," she said, her voice smooth but laced with an odd formality. Ren blinked. "What?" He took another step back, his hand hovering near his weapon. "I didn't." But before he could finish, the woman rose, her eyes still locked onto him. Her words were soft, but filled with an undeniable certainty. I am bound to you now, she said. By the laws of my people, you are my bonded. Ren's confusion deepened, but before he could protest or question her further, the sound of approaching footsteps cut him off. He didn't have time to think. The Xelvers were already coming, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone who stood in their way. Can you fight? Ren asked, urgency in his voice. The woman didn't hesitate this time. Yes. With that simple word, Ren knew he had no choice but to trust her. There would be time to figure out the strange situation later. Right now, they needed to get out. As the first group of Selvar enforcers rounded the corner, Ren and the woman moved as one, already ready for the fight to come. The alley stretched ahead, narrow and winding, like a maze with no clear exit. Ren's breath came in quick bursts as he followed Eri, who was leading them with surprising confidence. Her silver skin shimmered in the dim light, and her movements were fluid, almost unnatural in their precision. It was like she knew exactly where to go, as if she was hearing the path itself. Ren glanced over his shoulder, his hand still gripping the weapon at his side. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the alley behind them. Selvar enforcers. They were getting closer. He didn't need to look at them to know that. The Xelvers were relentless, and now they knew he had something they wanted. Eri was far ahead of him, almost like she was leading them to safety, but Ren couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. She wasn't just a captive he had freed. There was something about the bond she had mentioned, something that kept him tied to her, something that he wasn't fully understanding yet. He wasn't sure what she meant by bonded, but her words echoed in his mind. I cannot leave you. I must stay by your side. He didn't want to think about it. He had enough to worry about with the Xelvers closing in on them. They needed to escape, and fast. Eri suddenly stopped, her blue eyes flashing in the darkness. Ren pulled up beside her, his hand still ready at his side. There's a ship ahead, she said, her voice calm and steady, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of urgency. We can use it to get out of here. Ren nodded, his gaze following her as she moved toward the corner of the alley. He trusted her more than he cared to admit, but the thought of using an unfamiliar ship unsettled him. He'd need to trust her completely if they were going to make it out alive. Eri turned the corner swiftly and disappeared from his sight. Ren followed closely behind, his senses on high alert. The sounds of the Selvar enforcers' pursuit were growing louder. He could feel their presence, could almost hear their thoughts in the back of his mind. The bond between him and Eri, whatever it was, seemed to be amplifying his instincts, sharpening them. They came to a clearing, and there it was, a small, sleek ship parked under a shadowed overhang. It wasn't the most advanced vessel, but it was enough. Let's go, Ren said, his voice low. Eri didn't need to be told twice. She was already moving toward the ship, her steps light and sure. Ren followed her, his eyes scanning the area as they approached. He didn't see anyone nearby, but that didn't mean they were safe. They reached the ship, and Eri moved to the side, revealing a small hatch. Ren could hear the faint hum of the ship's engines, as if it was ready to take off at any moment. He wasn't sure where Eri had gotten this ship, but he wasn't asking questions now. They needed to get off the planet before the Xelvers caught up with them. Eri paused for a moment, turning to look at him. We can leave now, but once we take off, there will be no turning back. You're still my bonded, Ren. He frowned at her words. She spoke as if she was bound to him forever. I didn't ask for this, he replied, his tone more defensive than he intended. Eri's expression softened, but there was a sadness in her eyes. I know, but I cannot change it. Neither can you. Ren felt a pang of frustration, but didn't argue. He didn't have time for that. The Xelvers would be on them soon, and once they realized the ship was gone, they would be coming for them with everything they had. With a sigh, Ren stepped forward and entered the ship. The interior was simple, just enough to get them out of danger. He was already at the controls, setting the coordinates to take them out of the system. Eri sat beside him, her eyes fixed on the window. She wasn't just watching the stars. She was listening, feeling the pull of the bond that now tied her to him. Ren could feel it too. It was strange, like a tugging at the edges of his mind, a constant reminder that they were connected. He shook his head, trying to push the thoughts away. "We're leaving the planet now," he said, his voice focused. Eri didn't respond. She simply nodded, her expression unreadable. As the ship began to lift off the ground, Ren's hand hovered over the control panel. His mind was racing. He couldn't let himself get distracted by whatever strange bond they had. They needed to focus on surviving. He glanced at Eri, who was still staring out the window. Her calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the chaos around them. "How long until we're safe?" Ren asked, his eyes still scanning the instruments. Eri didn't look at him. "We are never truly safe, Ren. The Xelvers will always be after us." He gritted his teeth, but he couldn't deny the truth in her words. The Xelvers wouldn't give up. They'd come for her again. And if they thought Ren was protecting her, they'd come for him too. The stars stretched out before them like an endless sea, their light glimmering off the hull of the ship as it moved farther from the planet. Ren sat in the pilot's seat, his hand steady on the controls, but his mind was far from calm. He couldn't stop thinking about Eri, about the bond that had tied them together. She sat beside him, silent for the most part, but every so often, he could feel her eyes on him, like she was studying him. Her presence was a constant, like a pull at the back of his mind, and though he tried to ignore it, he couldn't. There was something about her that was both unsettling and comforting. She wasn't just any woman he'd rescued. She was part of something bigger. Finally, Eri broke the silence. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice soft, but it carried a quiet authority. Ren glanced at her, then back to the controls. "I'm setting a course to the neutral zone. It's a place where no one will bother us. It'll give us some time to figure out what comes next." Eri nodded, but her expression remained unreadable. "The Xelvers will follow us. They will never stop." Ren frowned. "I don't intend to run forever." He glanced at her, then back at the stars. "But I need to understand what's going on here. This bond. You. Why me?" Eri looked at him, her blue eyes serious. "You do not understand yet, Ren, but you will." She paused, and for a moment, he could feel the weight of her words. "I am from a faraway place," Eri began, her voice low and steady. "My people are ancient, and we live by different laws, laws that govern bonds between two souls. When you freed me, you did more than remove the collar. You broke the chains that held me to the Xelvers. But in doing so, you became my protector. And I, in turn, became bound to you." Ren shook his head, trying to grasp what she was saying. "So, what does that mean? You're telling me this isn't just about escaping the Xelvers. It's something bigger?" Eri nodded. "Yes, the Xelvers wanted to control me, to use me as a weapon. But now, it's no longer just about them. It's about the bond between us, a bond that was forged long before we met. I was sent here for a reason. I was meant to find you." Ren's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, meant to find me?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked out the window, her eyes distant, as if she were searching for something in the stars. "The bond is ancient. It cannot be undone. And once it is formed, it draws the attention of those who seek to control it. That's why the Xelvers wanted me. They knew what I could do. They knew that once the bond was formed, no one could stop us." Ren felt a chill run down his spine. "So, you're telling me that the Xelvers didn't just want you as a slave. They wanted the power of the bond between us." Eri's gaze shifted back to him. "Yes. And now, they will stop at nothing to break it. They want to destroy what we have before it can grow stronger." Ren turned his focus back to the stars. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to think about all of this. He had always been a soldier, a mercenary. His world had always been about black and white missions, no questions asked. But this was different. He couldn't deny the pull he felt toward Eri, the strange connection between them. It was like his instincts were telling him that this was important, that something was at stake far beyond just escaping the Xelvers. "Okay," he said finally, breaking the silence. "So, what now?" Eri turned to face him. "Now, we wait. We wait until the time comes for us to use the bond to our advantage." Ren raised an eyebrow. "Use the bond? How?" Eri hesitated before answering. "My people are powerful, Ren. They have knowledge, wisdom, and strength that the Xelvers could never understand. And when the bond between us is fully awakened, we will be able to tap into that power. Together, we can defeat the Xelvers. We can stop their plans once and for all." Ren wasn't sure what to think. Part of him wanted to believe her, to believe that they could truly take down the Xelvers. But another part of him, the soldier in him, knew that it wouldn't be so easy. "Do you really think we can defeat them?" he asked, his voice heavy with doubt. Eri's gaze was steady, unflinching. "I do, but we cannot do it alone. We need allies. We need to gather the forces of those who are willing to fight back." Ren nodded slowly, a sense of purpose starting to form in his chest. He had always been a lone wolf, a mercenary who worked alone. But now, for the first time, he saw the bigger picture. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about something far greater. As the ship glided through the stars, Ren knew that their journey had only just begun. The bond between him and Eri was more than just a connection. It was a force that could change the fate of the galaxy. And no matter how dangerous it became, Ren would stand by her side. The ship glided through the vast emptiness of space, a small speck among countless stars. Ren sat in the pilot's seat, his fingers gripping the controls with a firm resolve. Though his body was still, his mind raced with the weight of everything Eri had told him. Her words echoed in his mind. "We need allies. We need to gather the forces of those who are willing to fight back." It was a lot to take in. He had always fought for himself, worked alone. But this was bigger than anything he had ever faced. And with Eri by his side, he felt that strange bond pulling him forward, urging him to trust her, to believe that together they could do something extraordinary. Eri sat quietly beside him, staring out the window at the endless sea of stars. She had become a constant presence, and although her silence was comforting, it also left Ren with questions. There was something deep within her, a strength that went beyond her calm exterior. He had seen it in the way she carried herself, in the way she moved with purpose, as if every action was part of something greater. But Ren didn't know how to tap into that strength. Not yet. He needed answers. "So tell me more about your people," Ren said, breaking the silence. "The ones who have this power, what are they like?" Eri turned to face him, her blue eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "My people are ancient. We were once spread across the stars, building civilizations, guiding others, sharing knowledge. But we were hunted down, driven to the edge of the galaxy, scattered in hiding. The Xelvers were part of that destruction. They feared our power, our wisdom." She paused, her gaze distant, as if she were seeing something far beyond the ship's walls. "The bond you and I share is not just a connection. It is a legacy of my people. It is the key to unlocking the power that can defeat the Xelvers." Ren nodded slowly, trying to process what she was saying. "And how do we unlock it?" Eri looked at him, her expression unreadable. "The bond between us must be fully awakened. It is not something that happens quickly. It requires time, trust, and strength. When that happens, I will be able to guide us, to lead us to the allies we need. Together, we will rebuild what was lost." Ren's eyes narrowed as he looked out at the stars. There was a fire inside him, a desire to fight, to stop the Xelvers from causing any more destruction. But there was also a growing fear, a fear of the unknown. He had always been in control of his own fate, but now he was being swept up in something that felt beyond his reach. "All right," he said after a long pause. But we need to move fast. The Xelvers are not the only ones who will be after us. I'm sure there are others out there who will want to use us, for their own gain. Eri nodded, her expression hardening. I know. We must be careful, but we cannot wait forever. The longer we hide, the stronger the Xelvers will become. We must act, and we must act soon. Ren turned his attention back to the ship's controls. So where do we go first? Eri thought for a moment before speaking. There is a place, a neutral world in the Outer Rim. It is called Andros. It is home to those who have resisted the Xelvers' influence. If we can reach them, they will help us. They will understand the power we are dealing with. Ren's eyes lit up at the mention of a potential ally. Andros it is then. How long until we get there? Eri checked the star map on the ship's console. It will take us a few days to reach Andros. But once we arrive, we must be careful. The Xelvers have spies everywhere. We must not let them find us before we can make contact with the Resistance. Ren nodded. Got it. We'll stay low. But I won't let them get to you, Eri. Not after everything you've told me. She gave him a faint smile. Thank you, Ren. I know this is not easy for you, but together, we will succeed. We will defeat the Xelvers and reclaim what was lost. The words hung in the air between them, filled with a weight that neither of them could ignore. Ren knew the road ahead would be dangerous. He knew there would be countless challenges, enemies, and obstacles along the way. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a purpose beyond just surviving. He had a chance to make a difference. And with Eri by his side, he knew that they could do more than just survive. They could change the galaxy. The stars ahead seemed to shine brighter as the ship made its way toward Andros. Ren's grip on the controls tightened, and his heart quickened with anticipation. The journey was just beginning, and he would not let it end in failure. They would find the allies they needed. They would awaken the power of the bond. And together, they would destroy the Xelvers. For Eri, for her people, for the future of the galaxy. The days drifted by, the silence of space only broken by the hum of the ship's engines. Ren sat at the controls, his eyes scanning the endless stars as they made their way toward Andros. Eri remained at his side, her eyes distant as she lost herself in thought. It was as if the weight of everything they were heading toward was pressing down on her. Ren couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. Andros was supposed to be a safe haven, a place where they could find allies and help them awaken the power of the bond between him and Eri. But the longer they traveled, the more doubts crept into his mind. Would they really find the help they needed, or would they be walking into another trap? He glanced at Eri, noticing the slight tension in her posture, the way her fingers moved restlessly across the seat. She was worried, too, he could tell. But she didn't speak of it. Instead, she seemed determined to keep moving forward, focused on the mission. The days passed slowly, and the quiet of space made Ren uncomfortable. He wasn't used to being alone with his thoughts for so long. It had always been easier to keep moving, to stay busy, to avoid thinking about the things that haunted him. But now, with the silence and Eri beside him, the thoughts wouldn't stay buried. Finally, the ship dropped out of hyperspace, and the planet Andros loomed ahead. A lush, green world surrounded by a ring of asteroids. It looked peaceful, untouched by the chaos of the galaxy. But Ren knew better than to trust appearances. There were always forces at play, hidden behind every beautiful facade. Eri straightened in her seat, her eyes locking onto the planet below. "We are close," she said, her voice low but certain. "Once we land, we must be careful. The Xelvers are always watching. We cannot let them know we are here." Ren nodded, adjusting the ship's course toward one of the smaller landing bays near a forested area. "We'll keep a low profile. I'm not in the mood for a fight just yet." Eri gave him a small smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Neither am I." As they descended through the atmosphere, the lush landscape of Andros came into view. Green forests, sparkling rivers, and towering mountains. It was a place of natural beauty, untouched by war and destruction. But Ren couldn't shake the feeling that it was too peaceful. It was almost too perfect. The ship touched down with a soft thud, and Ren powered it down, casting one last glance at the controls before standing up. "We're here." Eri stood beside him, her eyes scanning the outside of the ship. She was always alert, always watching, as if she could sense something he couldn't. "We should head to the city center," she said quietly. "That's where we'll find the resistance. They will know we are coming." Ren raised an eyebrow. "How?" Eri turned to him, her gaze serious. "Because they've been waiting for me. My arrival here was not a coincidence. I was sent to Andros for a reason." Ren frowned, still unsure about everything she had told him. "You've been here before." Eri shook her head. "No, but they know who I am. They'd been tracking my movements, even when I was with the Xelvers. They know about the bond. They've been preparing." "Preparing for what?" Ren asked, growing more curious. She didn't answer right away, instead stepping toward the hatch and opening it. The cool air of Andros hit them both, and Ren felt a rush of fresh air fill his lungs. It was a welcome change after the recycled air inside the ship. "We'll talk more once we're with them," Eri said, her voice quiet but firm. Ren followed her out of the ship, his hand instinctively going to the weapon at his side. It was a habit, one he couldn't shake. As they moved toward the nearby forest path, the sounds of wildlife surrounded them. Birds calling in the distance, the rustle of leaves underfoot. It felt so peaceful, so serene, yet Ren couldn't help but feel on edge. They walked in silence, the path winding through the trees, until they reached a small clearing. In the center was a large building, simple but solid, made from natural stone that blended seamlessly into the environment. It looked like a place that had been built to last. Eri led him inside, where they were greeted by a small group of people. They were all dressed in simple clothing, their faces marked with both age and wisdom. These weren't just soldiers. They were survivors, and they knew the cost of war. One of them stepped forward, a tall woman with dark skin and piercing green eyes. She studied Eri for a moment before extending her hand. "Welcome, Eri. We've been waiting for you." Eri took the woman's hand, her expression softening. "It's good to be here." Ren stood back, watching the exchange. He could feel the weight of the moment, the significance of what had just happened. They weren't just allies. They were part of something much bigger than themselves. Inside the building, the atmosphere shifted. It was quieter here, the air filled with an unspoken tension. Ren followed Eri and the woman with the green eyes down a long corridor, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The building was old, but it had a solid, enduring feel to it, like it had been built to stand against time and battle. The woman led them into a room at the end of the hall, where several others were gathered. They were sitting around a table covered in maps and data pads. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the glowing screens scattered across the table. As they entered, the conversation stopped, and all eyes turned to Eri and Ren. "She's here," the woman with green eyes said softly. "And with her, the hope we've been waiting for." The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. There was a sense of anticipation, a belief that something was about to change. Eri stepped forward, and Ren watched as the others in the room nodded at her. They weren't just recognizing her, they were accepting her. "These are the leaders of the resistance," Eri said to Ren, her voice steady. "They are the ones who have been working to stop the Xelvers. They have resources, knowledge, and allies scattered across the galaxy. Together, we can finally make a stand." Ren glanced around the room. There were no soldiers here, no heavily armed fighters. These people were different, older, wiser, but worn down by years of war. They were survivors, not fighters. And yet, there was something in their eyes that told him they weren't ready to give up. One of the men at the table, an older figure with gray hair and a scar running down his cheek, spoke up. "You must be the one the prophecy spoke of," he said, his voice rough but filled with authority. The one who would break the chains and lead us to victory. Eri, I didn't believe it at first, but now I see. Ren felt a weight settle on his chest at the mention of the prophecy. Prophecy? He asked, glancing at Eri. Eri nodded. It's what my people believed. That one day, a bond would form between two souls, one who was of the stars and one who was of the earth. Together, they would awaken the power that had been lost, and together, they would fight back the darkness. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone processed her words. The man with the scar spoke again. If the prophecy is true, then it means that the Xelvers have underestimated you both. They have no idea what they're facing. Ren didn't know what to say. He hadn't signed up for any prophecy. He had just been doing his job, looking out for himself. But now, everything had changed. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was part of something much bigger, something he didn't fully understand. What do we do now? Ren asked, trying to push the uncertainty out of his mind. How do we stop the Xelvers? And how do we awaken this power you're talking about? Eri stepped forward, her eyes focused on the map laid out before them. We begin by gathering allies. We need to find those who will stand with us, those who are willing to fight against the Xelvers. But we must be careful. The Xelvers have spies everywhere, and their reach is long. We cannot trust anyone too easily. The man with the scar nodded. We have a few key contacts in different sectors. They'd been waiting for word from us. We'll need to make our moves carefully, but we can start there. Ren felt a knot form in his stomach. This was bigger than he thought, and the stakes were higher than ever. He wasn't sure he was ready for this, but there was no turning back now. They had come too far, and there were too many people depending on them. What's the first step? Ren asked, glancing between Eri and the resistance leaders. We move in the shadows, Eri said, her voice low but determined. We make small strikes, disrupt the Xelvers' operations, and slowly build our forces. The Xelvers will respond to every move we make, but we must be patient. This is a war of attrition. We will wear them down, piece by piece. The room nodded in agreement, the weight of their shared purpose binding them together. Ren could see the plan beginning to take shape. It was risky, but it was their only chance. The woman with the green eyes stood and handed Ren a datapad. This contains the locations of the first few allies we need to contact. They are ready, but they need a sign of trust. If we can prove ourselves, they will join us. Ren took the pad, his fingers brushing over the cool surface. It was a list of names, coordinates, and a brief description of the people they needed to meet. The first one was close, a small colony on the edge of the system. This is just the beginning, Eri said, her voice steady. We will gather our allies, strengthen the resistance, and then, when the time is right, we strike. The tension in the air was palpable as Ren stood beside Eri, watching the ship's engines power down. The small colony they had arrived at was nothing like the cities Ren had seen before. It was a simple place, tucked away on a rocky moon at the edge of the system. The buildings were made of weathered stone and metal, a sign that the people here were used to surviving on their own. Are you sure they can be trusted? Ren asked, his voice low as he turned to Eri. His hand rested on the hilt of his weapon, a habit that was growing harder to break the longer he spent in unknown territory. Eri glanced at him, her expression unreadable. I've worked with them before. They're not like the others. They've fought the Xelvers for years, and they know how to stay hidden. Ren wasn't convinced. He had learned the hard way that trust was a fragile thing in a galaxy full of betrayals. But for now, he had no choice. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. They stepped out of the ship and onto the dusty surface of the colony. The air was thin, and the ground beneath their boots was cracked and dry. There were few people out, but the ones they saw eyed them carefully, as if trying to decide whether they were friend or foe. Ren kept his eyes moving, scanning the area for any signs of danger. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. But for now, all was quiet. Eri led him through the narrow streets of the colony, past small homes and workshops. The people here seemed to go about their business without paying them much attention, but Ren could sense the underlying tension in the air. These were people who had learned to be cautious, to keep their heads down. They didn't trust easily, and they certainly didn't trust strangers. They reached the center of the colony, where a large building stood. It was a fortified structure, built to withstand an attack, with metal shutters covering the windows. This was where they would meet their contact, the one who could help them make their first move against the Xelvers. As they approached the door, Eri paused. "Stay close," she said. "Trust nothing and no one. The Xelvers have spies everywhere." Ren nodded, his senses on high alert. He wasn't used to being this cautious, but he understood the stakes now. The Xelvers were relentless, and if they found out what Eri and the Resistance were planning, it could mean the end of everything. Eri knocked on the door 3 times, each knock sharp and deliberate. There was a long pause before the door creaked open, revealing a tall woman with short black hair and a serious expression. She was dressed in a simple brown tunic, with a utility belt strapped around her waist. Her eyes flicked over Eri and then landed on Ren, studying him for a moment before she stepped aside. "You're late," the woman said, her voice cold but not unfriendly. "Come inside." Ren hesitated for a moment before stepping through the door, his hand still near his weapon. He had to remind himself that these people were allies, or at least they were supposed to be. Once inside, the woman led them down a narrow hallway and into a small, dimly lit room. A few others were already there, their faces shadowed as they gathered around a table. It was clear they had been expecting them, but they didn't seem eager to talk. Instead, they waited for Eri to speak first. Eri took a seat at the table, and Ren followed suit. "We need your help," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "The Xelvers are closing in. We need to move quickly, but we can't do it alone." The woman who had let them in took a seat opposite them. "And what exactly do you expect us to do?" she asked. "You know how dangerous this is. If the Xelvers discover what we're up to, they'll destroy this place." "We know the risks," Eri replied. "But we also know the stakes. We can't wait any longer. We need to strike before they can attack us first." Ren leaned forward, his voice low. "We need weapons, information, and more people. If we're going to fight the Xelvers, we can't do it with just a few of us." The woman studied him for a moment before glancing at the others around the table. They exchanged quiet words, their voices barely audible. Finally, the woman turned back to Ren and Eri. "We've been preparing for something like this," she said. "We have weapons hidden in the caves outside the colony, and we've been in contact with a few other cells. It's not much, but it's a start. We can help you, but it won't be easy. The Xelvers are everywhere, and they have eyes on this place." Eri nodded. "We're ready to take that risk. We've come this far. Now, we need to act." The night was quiet, almost too quiet. Ren could hear the faint hum of the ship's engines as they glided through the darkened sky, heading toward the location the Resistance had mapped out. The stars twinkled above them, far away and indifferent to the struggles happening below. He glanced at Eri, who sat beside him, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the console. "We're almost there," she said, her voice steady but laced with determination. Ren nodded but didn't speak. He was still processing everything that had happened since they arrived on Andros. The Resistance had been gathering resources, coordinating with allies, and now they were about to take the first step in their plan to strike back against the Xelvers. They were going to hit one of their supply depots, a small, well-guarded facility on a remote moon. The goal was simple: disrupt their supply chain. But it wasn't going to be easy. The Xelvers were well-equipped and always prepared for a fight. But Ren had learned that they could be outsmarted. With the Resistance's help, they had a chance. The ship broke through the atmosphere of the moon, and the barren landscape stretched out beneath them. In the distance, they could see the glow of the Xelver base, a series of buildings and towers surrounded by high walls and watchtowers. It was a fortress, but it wasn't invincible. Eri turned to him, her expression hardening. We move fast, hit them where they don't expect it, and get out before they can retaliate. We can't afford to stay too long. Ren checked his gear one last time, adjusting the straps on his belt and making sure his weapon was ready. Let's make it count, he said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. The ship touched down in a secluded area near the base, hidden from view by rocky outcroppings and thick, dry brush. The crew had already begun unloading the weapons and supplies they would need. Ren and Eri climbed out first, moving quickly to join the others who had already gathered. We have one chance at this, the woman with the green eyes said, her voice calm despite the tension in the air. We've got to take out their communications tower first. If we don't, they'll call reinforcements, and we'll be trapped. Eri nodded. We know the plan. Let's go. The group moved swiftly through the shadows, careful to stay out of sight of the Xelver guards patrolling the area. Ren's heart pounded in his chest as he kept close to Eri, his senses heightened. Every sound, every movement, felt amplified in the stillness of the night. They reached the base's outer perimeter without incident. The guards were sparse in this section, too confident in their security to anticipate an attack. The resistance had planned for every possible angle, and now it was time to execute. Eri signaled for the team to stop. They crouched behind a small ridge, the communications tower just ahead. It was heavily guarded, but there was a weak point, a small gap in the perimeter wall where the sensors were down. That was their entry point. Ren moved first, staying low and using the terrain to his advantage. Eri followed closely behind, her movements swift and silent. The others trailed behind, each of them taking their positions to ensure the success of the mission. They'd reached the wall undetected. Ren and Eri slipped through the gap, the others following behind them. They crept toward the communications tower, the only sound the soft crunch of gravel underfoot. Ren's hand tightened around his weapon. It wasn't long now. As they approached the tower, they spotted the guards stationed outside. Ren made a quick hand gesture, and the team split into two groups. One group would take out the guards while the others disabled the tower's communication systems. Eri was the first to move. She took out one guard with a quiet strike, while Ren moved in to neutralize the other. Within moments, the area was clear. Eri signaled to the others, and they moved quickly to set the explosives at the base of the tower. Ren kept watch, his eyes scanning the surroundings. They were running out of time. The Xelvers would soon realize something was wrong. With a soft beep, the explosives were armed. Eri gave a small nod, and the team fell back to a safe distance. Ren's heart was in his throat as he waited. The next few moments would determine everything. Clear, Eri whispered. The countdown began. 10 seconds. 5, 3. The explosion was deafening. The communications tower collapsed in a cloud of dust and debris, sending shockwaves through the area. Ren's ears rang, but there was no time to linger. The Xelvers would be scrambling, and they needed to move fast. Let's go, Eri shouted, and the team turned, sprinting back toward the ship. Ren followed, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The sound of alarms began to blare in the distance. They were already too late to stop it. The Xelvers would know they were under attack, but they had done what they came to do. They had struck the first blow. As they boarded the ship and began to lift off, Ren glanced at Eri. Her face was set, her jaw clenched. This was just the beginning. There would be more battles, more risks. But for the first time since they began this journey, Ren felt a sense of purpose. They were no longer just running. They were fighting back. We did it, Ren said, his voice a mix of relief and excitement. Eri looked at him, her expression softening for a brief moment. It's just the first step, she said quietly. But it's a start. The ship soared into the sky, leaving the chaos of the base behind them. They had made their move. And now, the war had truly begun.